stop helping.
Hey everybody, and thank you for watching another video. My name is Murge, and welcome to the Breaking Bad What If series that I call the Heisenverse, a series where I make a change somewhere in the Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul timeline and see how that one change ripples throughout the entire universe. And in this video, we're going to explore how different things could have been if these infamous words were never spoken.
Just remember who you're working for.
How would the partnership between Walter, Tuco, and Jesse look if the hot-headed Salamanca never lost his temper? Would things go as according to plan and Walter makes the money he needs for his family with no issues? Or would another unexpected incident happen that leaves him worse off than ever before? Well, that's what we're here to find out. And if you could leave a like on this video to support the channel, I'd appreciate it. Now, let's get into it.
Let me guess, you picked this place?
What's wrong with it? It's private.
Walter and Jesse stand nervously while waiting for Tuco at the junkyard. And since their last meeting where they barely had an ounce, they managed to grab a full barrel of methylamine to create their signature blue sky that they're known for. And after a couple more minutes of waiting, they spot Tuco's black Cadillac pulling in with the music blasting. And once him and his guys get out the car, naturally when seeing the blue meth, Tuco will be a little skeptical about it. But only after trying it once, he'd be 100% convinced that they're going to change the game with this product. And as Walter's handed the money by Gonzo, Tuco continues to go on about how great of a cook he is, clearly being in a good mood. And with a slight smile from his silver grill, he leaves Walter and Jesse with a few parting words saying, "Okay, Heisenberg, until next week." Then laughing as he gets back into the truck with his two guys following quietly behind him. And as they watch Tuco drive away until he's no longer in sight, the two head back to Jesse's lowrider while taking their sunglasses off. And after getting back in the car, Walter starts to calculate exactly how much money he needs for his family. And as he looks at the wad of money he's holding, he comes up with the amount of $747,000, and then he can quit. And with them roughly making $35,000 a pound and selling 4 pounds a week, according to those calculations,
You and I both clear about 70 grand a week. That's only 10 and a half more weeks. Call it 11. 11 more drug deals.
So for the next 8 weeks, they continue to meet up at the junkyard at the same time to do their deals. And as promised by Tuco, they do make a lot of money together. But by them being so consistent with their schedule, it makes their actions a little predictable for some. And with the popularity of this meth being in such high demand, it wouldn't take long to get the attention of the DEA, including his brother-in-law, Hank Schrader. But what nobody could have known or predicted is that Tuco would have a snitch amongst his ranks that's moving against him, and it would turn out to be his second in command, Gonzo, who's actually been a criminal informant for Hank and Gomez for just as long as Crazy 8 has. And after reporting back to them on a meeting between Tuco and the mystery man Heisenberg, Gonzo lets them know that they have another meeting that's scheduled for tomorrow. And with that information in mind, Hank and Gomez would spend the rest of the night assembling a strike team of Albuquerque's finest for potentially one of the biggest drug busts of their career. And later that same night, we pick up with Walter in Holly's nursery as he recounts all the money he's made so far. But when hearing Walter Jr. come down the hall, he quietly puts the money back into the air vent, then saying to himself before going to bed, "Just 3 more deals," as he prepares for another meeting with Tuco tomorrow. The next day, before the meeting, Jesse starts to have problems with the RV, and he would decide to have Badger's cousin tow it to his lot to work on it. And while he does, he goes to pick up Walter to meet up with Tuco at the junkyard. And like usual, they arrive early and start to wait. And even though this has been the same routine for the past few weeks, this time, something feels different for Walter, but he can't quite figure out why. But he would just ignore his feelings while him and Jesse continue to wait. But his paranoia will be completely understandable in this case, because not too far away, Hank and the strike team are waiting for the deal to go down. And they have eyes on 2 individuals wearing sunglasses, but not able to get a clear look at their faces with their backs turned. But only after a few minutes, they would see a black SUV pull into the junkyard, and that's when the agents get ready to mobilize. Then back over with Walter and Tuco, after their usual greetings with each other, Walter hands him the product, and like always, Tuco snorts the sample before No Doze puts it on the scale. And after a bit of small talk, Heisenberg will be handed a see-through bag of money. But the moment he goes to grab it, out of nowhere, they find himself being surrounded by several DEA agents catching everybody off guard. But before they're completely surrounded, Tuco grabs Walter, who's the closest to him, and he would use him as a human shield, putting one arm around his neck and using the other to wave a gun around and threatening to shoot him if they come any closer. And standing only a few feet away are Gonzo, No Doze, and Jesse, all with their hands up and showing that they're willing to go quietly. And amongst the surrounding agents would be Hank Schrader, and when he locks eyes with Walter, the two stare back at each other with complete surprise and confusion. Because for Hank, seeing his brother-in-law here, the first thought he would have is this has got to be one of those wrong place, wrong time kind of things, and he's just determined to save him, and ignoring the obvious fact that his brother-in-law is not innocent in this situation. But Walter, on the other hand, he's living his worst nightmare. Not because he's being held at gunpoint. He'd actually prefer Tuco killing him, because that's better than having to explain himself to his family about why he did what he did, especially after rejecting Elliot's offer a few months ago and having everybody believe that they're paying for his treatment. Because here he is now, caught red-handed. And as the surrounding agents hold their ground while trying to move in on Tuco, he puts the gun up to the head of the high school chemistry teacher and daring them to take another step forward as he pulls the hammer back on his gun. And seeing the worried look in Hank's eyes is what really gets to Walter, because he knows that everybody saw him as the caring, kind, and somewhat timid husband and father. But now, regardless if he dies today from a bullet or 2 years from now from the cancer, his reputation is never going to change, and he'll be forever labeled as a criminal, drug dealer, and who knows what else. And unable to face the consequences of his actions, Walter makes a detrimental decision when he tries to go for the gun that Tuco has against his head, and the struggle would only last for a split second, and then the gun goes off, killing Walter instantly, and as his body goes limp in his arms, the surrounding agents will open fire on Tuco while Gonzo, No Doze, and Jesse all take cover on the ground and doing their best to get away from the gunfire. And once the shooting finally stops, Jesse, who's hiding underneath the car, lifts his head to see what's going on. And not only is Tuco and Walter dead, but when scanning the area, he sees that both Gonzo and No Doze were also killed in the crossfire. And before he can even get up to properly surrender, he's dragged out from underneath the car and immediately put in the cuffs. And as the police escort him over to a squad car, he passes Hank, who is still processing the carnage in front of him. But when seeing Jesse, he'd regain his composure and casually ask, "Heisenverse, I assume?" But he says nothing as the police take him away and down to the station, leaving Hank and Gomez alone at the scene to see if they can make sense of it all. And with Hank thinking that Jesse is actually the mastermind, it makes him wonder what Walter was actually doing here. Because Hank is very much of the mindset that he must have stumbled onto the scene and got caught up in the middle of the drug deal going down. But Gomez is quick to point out the flaws in his argument, saying, "Okay, well, if that's the case, then where's his car? And more importantly, why would he even be out here?" Which Hank says in a desperate response, "Well, Walt could have been buying pot." And Gomez is silent for a moment, then saying in a somber tone, "Hank, I don't want to believe this as much as you do, but look around, man. I hate to say it, but I think Walt is actually Heisenverse." And things only get more emotional when the medical examiners start to bag up the bodies, and Hank even has to look away when seeing his brother-in-law completely riddled with bullets and being stuffed in a body bag. And he thinks about what he's going to tell Skyler and even contemplates on calling her now, but he holds off to find out what Jesse knows, because maybe there's more to this story. So after the coroner takes all the bodies away, Hank and Gomez head down to the station to question their only living suspect. Over at the police station, Jesse sits in one of the interrogation rooms where he'd be confronted by Hank and Gomez, who demand to know why Walter was there during a drug deal. And Jesse's in a pretty unique situation of being the only survivor of such a massacre, as well as knowing more than the police do at this point, and he would fully embrace the victim card by putting the blame on Walter for everything, and telling Hank that the only reason he was there is because he was blackmailed to be by his old high school teacher, which only angers Hank as he slams his hands on the table and demanding the truth. But Jesse remains calm, and in response he would pull out a Saul Goodman matchbook from his pocket and tells him, "Saul Goodman, that's my guy. Are you gonna call him? Or should I?" But being desperate for answers, Hank starts to yell at Jesse, telling him, "Listen here, you little shit. That was my brother-in-law out there, and you're gonna tell me—" "Hank, let's step outside," Gomez says, cutting off Hank as they both leave the room in frustration. And once outside, Gomez tries to talk some sense into his partner by saying, "Hank, I know this is your brother-in-law, and I know you want justice. Hell, we all do. But we have to play by the rules if we're gonna know anything. Come on, Gomi. All we have to do is put a little pressure on him, and I know he'll crack." Hank says, trying to reason with Gomez, but in response, he just tells him, "There ain't no pressure we're putting on anybody. The kid's already asked for a lawyer. You know it's out of our hands now." And as the defeat begins to set in for Hank, he looked through the window of the interrogation room at Jesse, and he tells Gomez, "I'm gonna take the rest of the day off. I gotta head over to Skyler's and try to beat the cops there before they come with a search warrant." And Gomez puts his hand on Hank's shoulder and tells him, "Go ahead, I got this. And I'm sorry, Hank. But if anything, I'll try to slow him down for you at least." And after Hank leaves the station, that's when Jesse's able to make his phone call. And once connected with Saul Goodman, he rattles off everything that's going on with him, as well as letting him know that he referred a client to him once before and mentioning Emilio Koyama. And Saul would ask a simple question. "Did you say anything? Anything at all?" "Nah, man, just what I told you," Jesse responds. And hearing all this, Saul decides to take the case and letting him know that he's even going to give him a discount for his repeat business, and tells him that a $50,000 retainer will be needed. And it's not like Jesse doesn't have the money, but that's the majority of his rainy day fund. But it wouldn't take much for him to realize that he'd rather be broken free than rich and in prison, and quickly agrees to the terms without a second thought. and Saul would just tell him before hanging up, "I'm on my way, kid." And after being escorted back to his cell, he gets comfortable knowing that if Saul was able to get Emilio off, then he's not going to be in there for too much longer. And he begins to reflect on everything that's happened today. And although saddened by his former teacher's death, they never built the bond that they had in the original. So in many ways, he's become free from the clutches of Walter White, who in all honesty was blackmailing him into a partnership to cook meth.
Either that, or I turn you in.
And while he continues to wait for Saul, he'd also begin to think about what he'll have left after this is all over. And the only thing that comes to mind is the RV and the half a barrel full of methylamine. And putting that together with everything that he learned from Walter, Jesse would decide that when he does get out, he's going to keep a low profile and would eventually start to cook again and perfect Walter's recipe. We pick up with Hank, who just got to the White residence, and before going inside, he takes a look at the Pontiac Aztek for any evidence in Walter's car, but he finds nothing. And before walking inside, he takes a deep breath knowing how hard this is going to be for the family, because he doesn't want to give any kind of confirmation that Walter is a drug dealer, but it will be the topic of discussion for the potential search warrant that's coming any minute now. So when he comes inside the house, it's just Skyler there, and at first he tries to lighten the mood with a couple of bad jokes, but Skyler just tells him to come out with it. And he says, "Alright Sky, this is about Walter. He's what is it, Hank? What about Walt?" Skyler questions, cutting off Hank. "Well, this afternoon, during a drug bust, Walter was there, and he was killed in the crossfire." Hank explains in a sincere tone, and at first Skyler stands with a blank stare, just taking in everything that she was just told, and all she can say in response is, "What?" as her voice begins to crack. "You have to believe me, Skyler. I tried like hell to save him, but I just couldn't," Hank says while his eyes begin to water as he continues. "And I'm not saying that I'm accusing him or you of anything, but sometime today or tomorrow, there will be a search warrant issued to check out this house for anything they can use against him. So I'm asking you this as your brother-in-law because I want to help you. Do you know anything about this, Skyler?" And she looks up at him with tears streaming down her cheeks, barely able to get out one word, saying, "No." And seeing Skyler in the middle of breaking down, Hank would go in for a hug to comfort her, and while he holds her, he says, "I know it's not going to be easy, but we're going to get through this." He says, speaking for his family as well as himself, because this is something that's definitely going to complicate his career at the DEA, but he stands firm on being there for Skyler and Jr. no matter what happens. Picking back up at the police station, when Saul Goodman arrives, he's allowed some time with Jesse to have a conversation, and he dismisses the police officers in usual fashion, saying, "Alright gentlemen, I believe you know the routine. You out, me in, now go." And once it was just them two, Saul tells him while pulling out the police report, "Alright kid, so being that you're the only witness / suspect and you were clean when they brought you in, I can definitely get you bail. And once I get that retainer, you're going to get the best legal representation money can buy. And you should have those charges going bye-bye within the week, so how's that sound?" And Jesse has a look of astonishment on his face as he says in a surprising tone, "Yo, seriously? Even with my alleged charges?" And he smiles before opening up one of the folders, then saying, "Hey, as far as I know, this was all just a mix-up and maybe you just got caught up in the crossfire. After all, you're lucky to be alive. And as far as your partner goes, the quote, mastermind, well, somebody has to go down for this, and who better than a dead guy, right?" And Jesse says with slight apprehension, "Yeah, I guess you're right." "Of course I'm right. And about your alleged charges, if you ever want to talk about that in depth, well, just stop by my office. But in the meantime, sit tight. I'll have you out in a minute." Saul explains with a wink as he gets up and heads towards the door. And after a few hours, true to his word, the criminal lawyer was able to get all the charges against Jesse dropped, and he was able to have everything pinned on Walter. Because when it's all said and done, even the surveillance images shows Walter handing Tuco the drugs and Tuco handing Walter the money, framing him as the real mastermind behind the operation. And no matter how hard Hank, Marie, or Skyler would try to advocate for Walter's innocence, similar to Howard Hamlin's reputation, Walter is forever branded a criminal drug dealer. And Hank is even put on leave while he's investigated for any associations with his brother-in-law, and effectively removing him as a threat to Jesse, Saul, and even Gus in the background. So although he's going to be on the DEA's radar, Jesse is able to walk away a free man without spending so much as a single day in jail. A few months after what happened with Walter and Tuco at the junkyard, we pick up with Jesse, who's been doing his best to keep a low profile, and even getting a little side job to keep a valid alibi. But noticing that he's no longer being tailed by the police or having cop cars parked in front of his house anymore, he pays Badger's cousin a visit, and after working out a deal and paying for repairs, he takes the RV out for a trip to the desert. And for the next few days, he tries to replicate the blue sky formula, and after a couple failed attempts, he'd finally get it right. But with him still being on the DEA's radar, he doesn't want to take a chance on telling it himself, so he enlists the help of Badger, Skinny Pete, and Combo to sell it for him, and essentially making Jesse the new Heisenberg. And in the beginning of this new operation, they make a decent amount of money, but Jesse finds himself living every day in fear that one of his friends are going to get caught or his own door getting kicked in. And he would decide to take Saul up on his offer to stop by his office to talk business. And besides, he does have him on retainer. So after showing off his version of the blue meth, Saul locks the door and tells him, "So you really do know how to cook the blue stuff, huh? Look at that." He says jokingly while looking at the product. "Yeah, whatever, man. So you said you know a guy, right?" Jesse questions. "Well, I know a guy that knows a guy, but yeah, and let me make a few calls and see if I can get you a meeting. So in the meantime, just keep making hay while the sun shines." Saul explains while sitting back at his desk, but little do they know, this mystery third party that he speaks of has already had Mike do some research on Jesse Pinkman, especially after what went down with Tuco, and they already know everything they need to know about the small-time meth cook. And regardless if he does cook the purest meth ever seen, Gus doesn't do business with junkies, and he refuses the offer to have a meeting with Jesse. So with the opportunity to wholesale being out the question, Jesse continues to have his friends sell the meth that he has on hand. And even though Saul couldn't get a meeting with Gus, he's still able to send some of his customers their way to keep their operation going until they can find a suitable buyer. But when some rival gangbangers start to move in on the little territory that he does have, the reputation of killing Spooge wouldn't be enough to keep his guys safe. Because one afternoon, while Combo's working the corner, two guys in a lowrider hold his attention long enough for a little boy on a bike to open fire on him while his back is turned. And after the first shot, Combo would try to make a run for it, but the little boy fires again and again, dropping him in the middle of the road. And with no witnesses in sight, the kid on the bike would just ride away like nothing ever happened, leaving Combo's body to be found by the police. And later on, over at the laundromat, Gus was just informed by Victor that some of his street dealers just killed somebody selling the blue meth. And happy with this news, he would urge them to continue with the hopes of getting this product off the streets permanently, because Jesse's so-called territory is actually just old Salamanca turf that Gus is slowly taking over. And he knows that with the blue stuff still around, people would want that as an option. But if he were to kill the competition off, all that would be available to buy is his product, made by his chemist. Picking back up with Jesse, after moving into a smaller apartment, he starts to date his landlord's daughter, a tattoo artist named Jane. And up until now, he's done a great job of keeping his two lives separate, or at least he thinks he does. But one day, while hanging out with Jane, he gets a phone call from Badger, and when hearing what happened to Combo, Jesse's eyes widen when he's told a particular detail about the murder. "Jesse, I think whoever did this was trying to send a message," Badger says. What makes you say that?" Jesse questions nervously. From what people are saying, he still had the meth and the money on him when he was killed, but apparently nobody's seen anything. And Jesse would again start to feel paranoid that someone is after him, and not to mention the emerging guilt for what happened to Combo, and he would need to get high to numb himself. But Jane, still being sober, would try to talk him out of it by saying, "Jesse, whatever pain you're feeling, drugs won't help. How about we just get out of here?" But he turns her down by saying, "I'm good, and I know you're sober and all that, but I'm about to smoke some crystal, and yeah, it will help." And as he stands up and starts walking down the hallway, Jane would question him saying, "Does this have to do with you being a drug dealer?" And Jesse would pause for a moment as he says, "Yeah, exactly." And he keeps walking to his room. And as Jane would start to leave, she wouldn't be able to walk out the door, and instead turns around and follows Jesse into his room. And for the next 2 days, they spend their time doing all the drugs they can get their hands on. And after telling Jane the whole truth, instead of her being the voice of reason like she normally would have been, now that her sobriety is broken, she reveals a darker side to herself when she encourages him to get revenge, and even going so far as to come up with a plan to find out who did it, and she tells him while they lay in bed. So I'm thinking, if this was a message, maybe we can find out who sent it. And Jesse questions with a half smile, "And how would we do that?" "Easy. All we have to do is stake out the place where your friend was killed, and my guess is this had to do with territory, so we should start there," she says confidently. And Jesse looks at her with confusion, then saying, "And how do you know that?" And Jane stands up on the bed while looking down at him, and she says with a smile, "Let's just say I had a life before you met me. Now come on." And every day for the next week, Jesse and Jane stake out the area where Combo was killed. But it wouldn't be too long before they start to notice a pattern going on with random meth heads walking up to a kid on a bike, then a car pulls up and they just walk away. And coming to the conclusion that Jane was right, and the guys in the car must be using the kid to hold and sell the drugs on the corner. And that really angers Jesse, not only for the fact that he killed his friend over some territory, but the same people are using a kid to do their dirty work, something that Jesse sees as unforgivable. And with Jane basically being the devil on his shoulder, she began to walk him through the plan that she has in mind by saying, "This is what we do. We can come back later on tonight, and you approach him like you're a customer trying to buy something, and then," she says while making a gun gesture with her hands. And Jesse, not being in the right mindset, would see this as a great idea despite the many flaws that it comes with. So as they head back home to wait until midnight, anytime Jesse would feel hesitant about the plan, he would take another hit of crystal to fuel his anger. And after a few hours, when the time finally comes, Jesse walked into his room only to find Jane passed out from some heroin that she took earlier. But still feeling wired from the meth, Jesse tries to wake her up, but she doesn't even budge, and he just chooses to go solo, because with the plan being so easy, he figures that he'll be back in no time, and plus, he wouldn't want her to see this. So after grabbing his keys, Jesse takes a long silent drive into the middle of the night. And after what felt like forever, Jesse pulls into a dark alleyway with his lights off, and while he waits for his targets, he begins to snort some meth off a CD to sharpen his killer instincts. And after taking a huge bump, he looks through the grimy windshield and he finally sees the gangbangers pull up. He then takes a few deep breaths while grabbing the gun from underneath the seat and causing his adrenaline to spike, because he knows that once he opens the car door, there's no turning back, a decision he made for himself the moment he left the house. So as he gets out the car to begin walking towards the two men, each step would have his heart beating faster and faster, but it doesn't stop his pace, and as he puts his hand in his jacket pocket to grip the gun, all the drugs that he's taken would begin to catch up with him when his vision starts to go in and out of focus. But he would just brush it off as anxiety as he continues to walk. But the two rival gang members can tell something's going on with the man approaching them, and they wouldn't even try to hide that they're going for their weapons. And after Jesse pulls out his pistol and tries to take aim, he wouldn't even be able to pull the trigger once as the two men shoot and kill Jesse in the middle of the street. And similar to the boy killing combo, the gangbangers calmly get into their car and drives away. And in Jesse's final moments, he would just look up to the stars while he bleeds out in the asphalt until everything goes dark. But just off in the distance, sitting in a black SUV would be Victor, looking through a pair of binoculars at the whole thing. And he picks up a GPS tracker off his lap before driving away as well, and showing that Gus has always had his eye on Jesse, and now he can officially control the market. Hey everybody, and thank you so much for watching this video, and I really hope you enjoyed another story from the Heisenverse. And I know there's a few plot lines that I have to tie up before the story concludes, but without Walter and Jesse, is it even Breaking Bad anymore? And the short answer is yes, because this story technically only went up to season 2 of Breaking Bad, and I still have a lot of characters to play with. So I'm gonna have a lot of fun trying to write a scene where Skyler meets Jane, or having the Salamanca twins come for Gale, but that's just me. But now I want to hear from you guys. What do you think of this story? Did you like it? Is there anything that you'd change? And what is the craziest pairing of characters in the Breaking Bad universe that you'd like to see? Whatever it is, let me know down below in the comments and I'll do my best to respond. Until then, my name is Murge. Later.